What if the time factor was completely irrelevant and the receptive mode factor is the only thing that's relevant? Because in the receptive mode, time stands still, time expands, time does whatever it needs to do to accommodate whatever needs to be done. Because time is perceptual, and receptive mode is all about being in the receptive perceptive mode, isn't it? Do you think that your inner being knows where you are in relationship to what you want? Do you think that your inner being knows where all of the other cooperative components are in relationship? Do you think that source is in contact with more cooperative components than only you? Do you believe that there are other cooperative components who are finding themselves in the receptive mode? Do you think then that source has already lined up all the receptive modes that are necessary for the inspiration that they need to do in order to rendezvous with you at the perfect time? And do you need to know what all of those are? Or is that something in the same way that you delegate so many tasks to other people who are well suited to do those tasks? Don't you think that that would be a good task to delegate to the universe, who is perfect at that? And so therefore, do you accept that everything is already lined up and that time is irrelevant because it's all lined up, and that your singular work is to get into the receptive mode in whatever way you can? So what is the distinction? When should I make the effort? When resistance is present, when should I make the effort to bring myself back into alignment? And when should I just ride the boulder down the hill and take the consequences of whatever's in motion? We say it's all about the momentum factor and where you are within it. Sometimes the contrast is light enough or slight enough that you can divert your attention from it. Or it might be a little more concentrated, heavier contrast, but still light enough that you can do a focus wheel and bring yourself back into alignment about it. And sometimes it's contrast that came in response to a belief that you've been holding for a long time, so it pushes a big button in you, and it's not likely that you're going to be able to do anything about it right here, right now. So what we're saying to you is, if you try to do something about those larger contrasts that have deeper roots within you right here, right now, it is almost every time just going to exacerbate it. So if you're struggling for the relief, then just let it go. If relief comes easily, and it should, if you're anywhere in the vicinity, relief will come easily to you. And if it doesn't come easily, then just say, this is a bigger thing for me, and I'm not going to solve it right now, this red hot minute, and trying to do it right now is hitting it too head on. I'm not making it better, I'm making it worse. And you know what we mean by that. You can feel when you're struggling and trying. Esther has become such an appreciator of focus wheels. But there are times that she can feel that it's just not working, and she just smacks her book closed and sets it on the table and says, later gator. She can feel she's getting nowhere with this effort, you see. So you all love expansion. You love accomplishment. You love improvement. You love expansion and evolution. And so navigating in contrast is what you love most. When you play tennis, you don't look for the person that you can beat every time. Do you? Oh, you do. But doesn't a better player help you improve your game? And doesn't contrast help you improve your game? And isn't improving your game delightful to you, this expanding being that you are? So appreciate your ability to navigate with contrast, because contrast is not only necessary, it's delicious in the world. Esther remembers driving the bus. Now the bus had a lot of wheels. There were 2 in the front, and then there were another set of 4, and then there were another set of 4, and then there was the car that had 2 wheels and then 2 more wheels. And some of the places, particularly in San Diego, that they would park the bus had speed bumps, and sometimes they would have to cross many speed bumps on the way to where they were parking. And some of the speed bumps were diagonal, which made it extra fun. And so everything was going like this as they're moving over them. But over time, Esther became an expert at navigating those bumps. And she took such pride. She'd say, okay, I've got this one. And she would wheel way to the left so that she could hit that speed bump straight on. And those bumps weren't bad. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And then she would turn, and she didn't care what the car did because they weren't in it. And so it would, as it would come across. So in the beginning, those speed bumps felt like the bane of her existence, because it felt like everything inside the bus was changing places with everything else inside the bus. But after a while, she saw it as this delicious challenge, and she so looked forward to the compliments that she knew were going to be forthcoming from Jerry, as he was thrilled with her ability to navigate these speed bumps. And so that's the way we would like you to appreciate contrast. In other words, when you're in the receptive mode, contrast becomes not irritating, it becomes almost thrilling. You could say joyfully challenging. Joyfully challenging. But you beat up on yourself as if contrast is a bad thing. And in part, we understand, because we've been saying to you for years, you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. Contrast, contrast, contrast. And we've been encouraging you to do what you can to soften the contrast, because that was our way of explaining to you how to get into the receiving mode. But there is no contrast that will ever be greater. It's the greatest contrast that you could ever bring to yourself. Oh, let us say this in a better way. There's a much better way to say this. The singular thing that will keep you out of the receiving mode above all other things, or all other things in combination together aren't as great as this one thing, is you beating up on yourself, because your inner being so doesn't do that. And in this context, you're going to hear this in a clear way. It isn't only that your inner being doesn't do that, it's that the momentum that your inner being has otherwise is so enormous. The love and appreciation that your inner being has is a huge, huge, huge momentum. And when you get crossways of that huge momentum, even a little crossways of that huge momentum, it's a big speed bump. And it'll shake up the contents of your bus. So let's Swiss cheese that. So the whole subject is, I want to always love and appreciate myself. I want to see myself as my inner being sees me, but often I do not. So that's the problem that you're wanting to solve, or that's the task that you're wanting to accomplish. And it must be a big task, because it continues to not be accomplished. And it's because you're taking too much of it all at once instead of a little bit of it at a time. So let's take some little bits of that at a time. So I don't see myself as my inner being sees me sometime. But when do I? When do I see myself as my inner being sees me? I so often am holding someone as my object of attention, adoring them, and I know for sure that in those moments I'm in the receptive mode. What else? I'm brilliant at the work I do. So much of my life is in perfect flow. In other words, so you Swiss cheesed it, and you are in the receptive mode. You are in the receptive mode. You are right now in the receptive mode. Rather than approaching it from a place of resistance, we found a way to approach it from a place of non-resistance. So if the receptive mode is really what you're asking for, in other words, I want clarity, I want to be in the receptive mode, then maybe you have to stay off that subject for a little while, because that subject is keeping you from the receptive mode. How about that? So being in the receptive mode now, it doesn't take much of doing that before that won't be a hot button that can ever be pushed. That someone can ask something of you that formerly just sent you into orbit because it was so unpleasant or unfair or uncomfortable or whatever, and it won't bother you because you've got it in perspective. We're going to say something that we have never said before. The only contrast that is of any significance is of significance because of the vibrational gap between you and you. That's what contrast is. It's not about that issue or that issue or that issue or that issue. It's about not being in the receptive mode. So contrast equals not in the receptive mode, period. Contrast equals not in the receptive mode, period. But when you say, no, contrast is about that, and I got to fix that, you're not going to fix it, you're going to make it bigger. And contrast is about that, you're not going to fix it, you're going to make it bigger. Contrast is only about not being in the receptive mode. And I can get in the receptive mode on this and this and this and this. I'm off topic, but I'm in the receptive mode. Good, then there's no contrast. No, Abraham, there still is contrast if I go back to that. Well, don't go back to that. Shouldn't I go back to that? Shouldn't I be solving all my issues of contrast? Yeah, if you want to hold yourself out of the receptive mode. If you want to do it alone, if you want to try to reason it with your own, we love you so much, small, puny little mind. We're having fun with you. You're brilliant. But you're not as brilliant when you are out of the receptive mode. Not even brilliant when you're out of the receptive mode. We'll just leave it there. And so, are you saying to us, Abraham, there are things in this world that when I look at them, I can't be in the receptive mode. And you know what we say to you? Same for us. That's why we don't look there. We're not going to sacrifice alignment. We're not going to give up our infinite intelligence-ness for a problem that will solve itself. Let's get rid of that hot button once and for all. Accepting the perfection of contrast and not letting it be the reason that I don't like myself. Because the contrast caused you universally, collective consciously, to create a big vortex and sources there with that knowledge projecting that vibration of what you all have created, and more like you are getting in the receptive mode and realizing the perfection of what you've dreamed into place. But the most awesome part of it is not that life's going to be over here better. The most awesome part of it is that you all get to watch it happen. One thought at a time, one dance at a time, one song at a time, one joyful realization at a time. Yeah. It's like when you get in your car, you don't get under the hood and try to pull pulleys and push pistons. You do what you do. You decide where you're going to go and point it in that direction. You don't try to be the engine that makes it work. Can you feel the difference of having your hands in the clay and not tuned in, and having your hands in the clay and tuned in? We're asking you to really put your hands in clay right now, like an artist does. You've got your hands in the clay and you're saying things to yourself like, I'm not good at this, and I have no idea what I'm even going to make, and this stuff is dirty and sticky, and I've never done anything like this before, and it's going to turn out like really bad, and probably after I make it I won't even fire it, and I'm not going to show it to anybody. And that's hands in the clay. Or there's hands in the clay. Ooh, this feels so good. This clay has wonderful texture. This clay is easy to mold. I can turn this clay into the image that's in my mind. I'm having such a good time molding this clay. This clay is pliable in my hands, and my ideas are turning into reality right before my eyes, and this is such a satisfying experience. That's hands in the clay too. Hands in the clay is the action part of it, but you're in the receptive mode. The idea came, the desire came. Now more ideas are coming. Where do I get the clay? What kind of clay do I get? Oh, Abraham, do you mean there is momentum to the receptive mode? Abraham, do you mean that the receptive mode will never peter out, that it will never end, it will never stop being? Yes, it will never end. You get in the receptive mode and it just goes and flows and surprises and delights in your never-ending joyful becoming. Do I ever take my hands out of the clay? No. You got your hands in the clay. You came born with your hands in the clay. Got your hands in the clay. You can like it or not. You can enjoy the molding process or you cannot enjoy the molding process. But you can't stop sifting through. You can't stop giving birth to desires. You can't stop creating a vortex, and we will never stop responding to your vortex. But you do have a choice about whether you've got your hands in the clay in the receptive mode or your hands in the clay in the not receptive mode. Those are your options. You have a choice of being happy or being miserable. You have those choices, and the true mastery is all about that, isn't it? That was really good molding.